Kathy got out of bed and lit a cigarette, the first one of the day. Walking over to the front door, she opened it and stepped outside to the cool morning air to watch the sunrise. Sitting in her usual chair, she regretted not bringing a sweater, but was too comfortable to go and get one. And besides, she would miss the sunrise if she did. A few moments later, she heard the door open and looked towards it. Her roommate, Elizabeth, had woken up a few minutes earlier and was still half asleep.
"Good morning,"
said Kathy with a smile. Elizabeth gave a half-hearted wave to acknowledge her roommate and then sat down. Kathy relished these moments when she could spend time with Elizabeth and smoke, as normally Elizabeth would avoid her like the plague when she was smoking. The sun gradually rose, the rays peeking over the railing as it did so. Kathy stubbed out a cigarette and Elizabeth smiled.
"How was your night?"
she asked, and Kathy hesitated to answer. She hadn't been sleeping well for the last week, and it was starting to show. Now out of her groggy state, she could see the deep bags under Kathy's eyes, feeling worry for her roommate and friend. Elizabeth looked at Kathy thoughtfully, and Kathy then responded,
"Not the greatest. I tell you, these dreams have been really messing with my head. All I can do is run through them all day, and all night I dream about them."
Kathy looked despondently at Elizabeth, who took Kathy's hand comfortingly. A look of infinite compassion was on Elizabeth's face, despite the more harsh thoughts going through her mind. She would never admit, being a staunch realist, that Kathy's sleep problems were completely solvable, but she always had a soft spot for her friends, so rather than be a dick, she just nodded and listened.
"Do you want me to pick up anything while I'm out?"
called Elizabeth as she was putting on her shoes.
"No thanks, I'm good."
Elizabeth waved goodbye as she walked out the door into the elevator, where she pushed the call button. The elevator arrived a moment later and she stepped inside, the door slamming behind her. She sighed, forever cursing the elevator. She walked out to her car and got in, where she started it and the music began to play. She didn't know the song, but decided to leave it in case she ended up liking it. "Whatever you may have done, know the best is yet to come. After the dust settles, look around. You may be 6 feet underground. If you can see, listen to me. Not everything is as it seems." Elizabeth snapped the radio off at that line, feeling unnerved. The drive was going well, but to quote the song, not everything is as it seems. The sun had gone behind a cloud and the wind had picked up considerably, causing the car to slew around in the loose sand of the road. That snapped Elizabeth back to reality, and she corrected, now in full alert and almost at her destination. She arrived at the cafe, ready to work. She was the bookkeeper for a local restaurant, a demanding yet simple job. She could let things go for a week at a time, but bitter experience taught her that 20 minutes a day spent entering receipts was better than countless hours spent wasting time trying to figure out what goes where. Once the receipts were dealt with, she packed up and headed for home. She parked and went upstairs to change into her beachwear, preparing for a nice long walk.
"Hey, how did it go?"
asked Kathy as Elizabeth entered the door.
"Fine."
She replied. Walking into her room, Elizabeth set her stuff down and scrunched up her face as the wind picked up. This wouldn't deter her from her walk, just make it more unpleasant. Elizabeth walked through the door, looking rather unsettled.
"What's wrong?"
asked Kathy as Elizabeth collapsed onto the couch. Elizabeth just looked at Kathy with an expression of pure sorrow, and Kathy knew not to press any further. Kathy just turned, worried, and walked back to her room where she sat, mulling over what could possibly have unsettled her friend so deeply. Kathy didn't see Elizabeth all through the next day, until she came home, looking slightly less unsettled than yesterday, but still appeared to lack the usual air about herself. Elizabeth entered the front door, followed by her good friend Luke.
"Oh my God, it's great to see you. How have you been?"
said Kathy as she saw Luke for the first time in ages. Luke gave Kathy a big hug and began to say something, but a look from Elizabeth stopped him dead in his tracks. "I've been well, thanks. You're looking great, Kathy." Kathy smiled, touched by the compliment, and then Luke and Elizabeth retreated to Elizabeth's room, possibly to discuss what may have possibly have happened. A while later, they left the room, Elizabeth looking as if the slightest breeze would cause her to collapse at any moment. They waved goodbye to Luke, and then Kathy embraced her friend, saying,
"What happened? I won't rest until I find out. Did Luke do something to you?"
"No, he didn't do anything. Anyways, you wouldn't even believe me if I told you."
The embrace had ended, and Elizabeth stared at her friend with eyes like saucers.
What's the worst that could happen if you told me, hon? I mean, laugh at you? But like I said, I won't stop until we get to the bottom of this.
Elizabeth began crying and spilled the whole story, and Kathy looked on, offering a nod once in a while, not saying anything and just listening to her friend. By the end of the conversation, Elizabeth was a mess and Kathy was deep in thought, trying to believe her friend even though the tale she had just laid out was so astronomical. Kathy awoke somewhat refreshed the next morning, one nightmare replaced with another. She walked through the condo, trying to find Elizabeth, but was nowhere in sight. She spied a note on the kitchen counter and read it.
I've gone back to the beach access point to try and find out more of what happened to Luke, and maybe try to stop this. If I don't come back today, I'm probably okay. But if I'm not back in the next few days, come look for the area that I described. Try to find the service station and talk to Jimmy. Tell him that you know me, and you know that it wasn't me and Luke that killed his younger brother. Look up the date that I talked about and do as much research as you can before you come look for me. I love you. I don't want you to suffer the same fate that I might. So please, only come looking for me if you are well prepared. Elizabeth.
The tears didn't stop for the next few days that Kathy spent waiting for Elizabeth to return. On the third day, Kathy finally began to search up the information that she could get her hands on, and as the picture unfolded, she alternated between fear for her friends and anger that they may very well have committed this atrocity. It was 9 p.m. when Kathy finally gathered the courage to walk down to the beach and try and find her friend. Another local resident missing. From our sources, we have learned that yet another local resident connected to the disappearance of Luke Olson and Elizabeth Post has gone missing. An anonymous tip to Crime Stoppers has yielded some new evidence, and we now take you live to the beach where supposedly a portal in time has been discovered. Here's Jason Corning. Thank you, Corinne. I'm standing here on this beautiful beach, where there is supposedly an uglier sight to behold. These rocks here are supposedly the only access point to this time portal, and in a moment, I myself am going to reach down between them and see for myself. Jason leaned down and reached his hand between the rocks, and before the live video feed turned static, the expression on his face turned one of utter shock and awe. Jason? Jason? Corinne turned back to face the camera, trying to maintain some professionalism, but the tears in her eyes were clearly visible as she tried to restore order. I apologize for the technical difficulties. We should have the video feed up in a few... She then broke down, sobbing as she was handed a sheet of paper. Oh my God, Jason! I've just been handed a bulletin informing me that Jason is missing. Hold on. Corinne looks down and starts to search her phone, getting paler and paler as she scrolls down the screen. She then drops her phone and runs off camera, possibly to go to the location of the beach to go after her co-anchor, Jason Corning.